Okay. I think this you restarted is why this is so short. But we were also talking about when you make something short and sweet. So there was a question or a point in here, and it started to already make me want to answer. So it's only a couple minutes long. I'm starting at 58 seconds because there's sort of a preamble, and I think that we stop before the very end either because you say, hey, I'm going to make a different video, and I see there's a half an hour video. But this is already something I wanted to comment on, the two types of existence. I think I did comment on those, and that also my view is deducible from the answer I gave on my own definition of my eyes itching. I think it's the cat. Um, but anyway, okay.
Right. Exists. You begin by saying, I say, my definition of exists is that it has a place. And you miss out the qualifications that I make. I say there are two kinds of existence, and I always mean to have them qualified. If I don't qualify them, I presume that the context qualifies them. I'm in error and I forgot to qualify them. But every time I use the word, it has a qualification when I use it. And that is, it either concretely exists or it abstractly exists. I'd hope to draw some comment on that dichotomy.
Hope to.
Firstly, I should like to, shit, I forgot to plug in my better camcorder.
Okay, so see, there's another 20 seconds of that. All right, well, I think I did answer a little bit. Here's the thing. Okay, there is, the thing has to have a space, it has to be in space, or it can be abstract. And if it's abstract, I'm not sure if it has to be in space or not by your definition. But here's where the pyrrho definition and the HYTHLODAY definition comes in, because I have a different definition of exists, right? And you think about it with my definition of exists, meaning it appears in here. Does space appear in here? Does space? It's an abstraction. It's because if this idea of space, you can apply it to all of your five senses. That's what puts those five senses together so much, is that they all correlate to space and time. They're very clear in that. And you could say all our perceptions are clear in time. They seem to come one after the other. Yeah, but in the here and now, sometimes it's hard to tell whether you thought one thing first or another. And time isn't so certain as it is with music. Okay, so to me, abstractions come from the data in the film strip and its patterns. It's like a diff. We have a thing in computer science, we use a lot of diff. I might change a file and I have the old version of the file. I run a diff, it shows me which parts changed, right? So that little comparison becomes a pattern, right? There could be that I check a bunch of files and it's always the same kind of, the change could be in common even if all the pairs of files are different, but the change could be the same kind of change or the same fragment of a change, right? A pattern. We abstract information by doing that kind of thing with the film strip. And if you make spatial calculations, then, they tend to work out with the five senses so well that it's a very successful abstraction. Um, but also, it seems pretty clear that different animals have different spatial recognition facilities built in the whatever kind of the motor function their brain, however it devotes. All animals seem different in how much is devoted to, the being all ninja, for example, understanding space. So it's built in. And so the fact that it seems like, well, there's no other way to see things, I mean, you're the one that emphasizes how we're just a machine, and we're built in to analyze the information spatially. I would imagine because evolution and doing it spatially works so well that, of course, we should believe in space. Things are spread out. It's just as concrete of a thing as anything else. So I do believe that for something to exist, it also has to have a physical place, because I do believe in materialism, which is this theory that there is, stuff. It could be energy, clay, liquid, whatever stuff. I think energy is the main general way to say it. But there's stuff, um, and it's out there. And like whether I'm here or not, whether I'm atomized or die or was never born, the stuff would still be there. What that stuff is exactly like, is a subject of study in physics and all other disciplines. And abstractions, however, is a similar thing. And as a materialist, to me, uh, it's sloppy the way for all of history people want to call that non-physical. Its physical component has to do with like, is the bitmap, here's the bitmap of my dog that just recently passed away. Um, is that physical in the computer? I mean, yeah, it's little tiny magnets. It's subtle, but it's a physical thing, and that's the way it is with any idea, and that's what I think an abstraction is, right? I don't think an abstraction exists on its own and we discover it. I think this is what exists on its own, this constant stream of individually unique perceptions that you have a different one than I have. This is what's always happening. And we take out of this the patterns and we make an abstraction, right? And so the kind of abstractions we can even make is limited to however this works. This is pretty complicated. It's got a lot of built-in things, certain numbers of colors, fastness of response, all of that is very, just we've got certain equipment, you know, and so the abstractions we can create from, our particular set of equipment is obviously going to be limited by that equipment. So now, as intelligent human beings, we can create new equipment. You can take data, transform it into visual data, transform it into audio data. Um, you know, and in that way, I do believe we can perceive, everything eventually in infinite years or whatever, in the sense that there's no particular limit that we couldn't, slowly expand ourselves to understand with the help of, you know, extended senses, which we have in copious amount, an infrared camera, a telescope, a microscope, electron microscope, a tunneling microscope, um, mass spectroscopy is breaking stuff down. It's always into a visual thing. A chart of just data, of, birth rate versus individual wealth over time or whatever. That is making a picture, a visual thing of something that would be considered abstract. So to me, in that way, it's all material. It's that there's the raw information. Then, like if you did that diff between two frames, that'd be a order one abstraction. And when you take all of these diffs and look at the patterns that the diffs have, that'd be a second order, and so on and so forth, into further and further abstraction. And things become rarefied as you generalize them more and more. But they're either just as material a fact as a direct perception of a physical object with the place, and or they're just a false abstraction. People make a model and it's not apt. Um, but even a true abstraction is not. It just means that it doesn't persist even though it doesn't work, right? Like if it has a serious flaw, then you'd have to give it up. So it's true in the sense that it's apt, right? But it's limited to we can only understand certain things about the world in the first place. So we apply it. If it works well, what I'm saying is it can't work perfectly. it can work well enough, right? Or it can work not at all. So I think I did say something. I think that distinction that there's two types is that fine. That's your definition. I see how that could work. In the sense of I'm a materialist. I believe everything has a physical location. So that's why I've always been emphasizing even abstractions or ideas. Um, there's not some other world that's going on, and computers work right here in the physical world and I think when I point that out, everybody agrees with it, and people don't take it into account if I don't point it out. Um, that's HYTHLODAY existence. My definition of existence is this film strip exists. Everything else is defined out of it. What does it mean to be I? It's defined from this film strip. This film strip has an observer. Does it actually have an observer? Maybe it is the observer. Okay, it has an observation phenomena. What is that? We point at it. The film strip, like, I have it. You don't have it, so it's not like an apple, and I could say, look, that's an apple, and then we both agree there's an apple there. But you just have to look in your own head and go, am I constantly perceiving these images and smells and things as everybody has described over the history of written communication now? So, um, you can't force somebody else to admit that it happens, but you could be pretty confident that it does happen. Um, because one example is all you need to be convinced. And then the fact that so many other people say, yeah, I'm also perceiving things happening over time in color and space and sound and taste and touch and other feelings that I have, like hunger and thirst and lust and memories. So to me, to exist means to be a part of our perception somehow. Right? And that's why I say illusions exist, because the things that are only a part of the perceptions in our head, and they're not a part of the physical material world, right? Of the greater material world, then, there's a distinction obviously to be made there, but it's not one of existence, right? That's the point of that. It's not, the difference is not whether it exists or not, it's like what it exists as. Um, is it just an imaginary thing? Is it real? Same thing with emotions. Is this fear just imaginary, or is it imaginary but also apt because there's something to be afraid of? So, to me, why does time exist? Well, I don't know. Is there time in this film strip? Yeah, it's inherently has a time sequence. Things happen before and after. So, all of these basic philosophical words come out of descriptions for the film strip. And that's necessarily so, whether somebody did that on purpose, because they're all starting from this. Ah, discovered it, right? This is our starting point. Oh, but I wanted the starting point to be not you, but mathematicians, the axioms of, algebra. Um, yeah, no. This is what we start out with, and then we work down to the axioms of algebra, right? And then from the axioms of algebra, we could build back up and, do things up here like with physics, right? But it goes in this direction. This is the data, and then it only exists if it's somewhere in the data. And so that includes data exists, information exists. So that's my reply to that, and I do understand you think there's two kinds. One, and I assume this is the physical, the more physical side of it. You could explain that yourself, that it has a position. That sounds physical. Abstract, it also exists. I don't know if that also has a position, or what your position is on that, on the points I was making, which I thought we agree on, um, that there's a physical aspect to these things. Sometimes people try to say, oh, yeah, it's happening in your brain, but it's still not physical. There's still an otherworldly sense to it. But why? Because it doesn't happen in the real world. Maybe a circle isn't a circle drawn like we think. Maybe a circle is just this idea of an equidistant, you know, points from a center, in which case that idea does exist. But you can't draw a perfect rendition of a circle. Oh, that's different. You can't draw a perfect rendition of a circle. So no perfect rendition of a circle exists, but a circle exists because that's just the idea that you could describe in words. You don't have to draw it. You just say the point's equidistant from a central point, or however, various ways you can define it. So to me, I do make that distinction between physical and abstract uh, based on how material, the materiality of the fact things that are merely ideas are not as material. They don't matter as much. They don't have as much impact as things that are physical, which are right there and have Kabothian, joules of energy packed in them because of E equals mc squared, and they have more. Uh, they have the physical consistency where they, uh, where the analysis, spatial analysis applies to them. So, right, that would probably be what you're saying in terms of my system is that we have this abstraction space from the data in the film strip. We have abstractions which we've made from data in the film strips. What's the difference? Well, when it gets really abstract, it stops being subject to space and time based analysis, right? This stuff in this data, we're always analyzing the space and time. It happened here and there, and how did the order. But some of these abstractions, we don't necessarily worry about space and time with those ideas until we apply them back to the real world, which, of course, is they always have that connection.